Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss.
And I'm Marina Mastros. Terminator Dark Fate is the 6th Terminator film, or if you're only going by the ones that James Cameron and Linda Hamilton had a major creative influence on, the 3rd Terminator film that matters.
Yeah, nothing against the Rise of the Machines or Terminator Salvation or Terminator Genisys, especially Salvation, since we don't want Christian Bale to yell at us.
Give me a answer! What don't you get about it?
We're so sorry.
So sorry. My fault.
But as diehard fans of the Terminator franchise, we can tell you that Dark Fate is hands down the best Terminator since T2, and the way this film updates the Terminator timeline post T2 is really the best way to understand this whole canonical history.
Erik and I are going to break down the full Terminator timeline and the ways Terminator Dark Fate connected to and changed that timeline.
Yeah, and Dark Fate actually hits some fun Easter egg references to T2. If you're watching closely, we're going to cover it all in this episode of
Explained!
And spoiler warning, if you have not seen Dark Fate yet, or any of the other Terminator movies, then I guess you still care.
Okay, quick summary of the timeline from the first 2 Terminators. In the first film, set in 1984, the T-800 arrives from the year 2029 to assassinate Sarah Connor, future mother of John Connor, leader of the human resistance. In 2029, John Connor was about to close in on the machines and end the war, so Skynet sent the assassin in as a last-ditch effort. Kyle Reese also arrives from 2029 to protect Sarah, and they end up hooking up and she becomes pregnant, making Reese John's father. Reese dies and destroys the T-800. Sarah escapes.
Yeah, time travel in the Terminator films takes the form of predestined loops. So like, what happens has always happened. It's confusing. It's why Avengers Endgame said, screw that, we're just gonna make Cap old and everyone will cry and not care about the weird logic. Except those of us who did both. Huh? What? Anyway, T2 Judgment Day, the next movie, is set in the year 1995, 2 years before Skynet becomes self-aware and nukes the planet. Judgment Day, 1997. Skynet in 2029 sends a new Terminator, the awesome shape-shifting T-1000, to kill John, who's now a punk kid with foster parents. Sarah Connor is imprisoned in a mental hospital. Another T-800 also comes back, but this time he was reprogrammed to protect John. They find Miles Dyson, a Cyberdyne engineer who used the scavenged piece of the T-800 from the first film to build what would later become all of Skynet.
Oops. T2 ends with them destroying that technology, destroying the T-1000, and destroying the reprogrammed T-800. Thumbs up, so sad. So Judgment Day was erased, or was it?
Yeah, this is where Terminator Dark Fate picks up, but we'll hold off on that to briefly explain the other timelines from the other movies that unfortunately exist. Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is set in 2004 with Skynet sending the TX this time. Another reprogrammed T-800 protects adult John and his future wife Kate, and he gets them to a bunker in the mountains to survive as Skynet actually takes over and nukes the planet. It happens.
That brings us to the post-apocalyptic Terminator Salvation.
Oh, good for you! And how was it?
It takes place in the much distant future of 2018.
Yeah.
Resistance leader John avoids a complicated assassination attempt, meets Kyle Reese, and scores a significant victory against the machines.
Now, up until this point, the whole Terminator history existed on one timeline. That is, until Terminator Genisys, which f***ed everything up. To understand the timeline logic of that movie, we turn now to YouTube. This nifty video from, who's that? New Rockstars!
2015?
Marina, I think we just time traveled.
What happened to Gabe?
He was made obsolete by a more efficient model.
Erik's definitely a human. Yikes! Watch that video for details on Terminator Genisys, but here's the gist. The 1984 timeline as we know it was completely reset so that Sarah Connor had another friendly T-800 raise her from a young age, 1973 onward.
Yeah, Genisys plays out like a shot-for-shot replay of the first Terminator film, combined with elements from T2, like a T-1000. They end up jumping from 1984 ahead to 2017, when the new Judgment Day was going to take place due not to Skynet, but to a worldwide OS developed by Miles Dyson's son called Genisys. There are additional layers of time travel loops and logic that don't totally make sense. Genisys more or less shattered the Terminator timeline.
Which is why it's such a relief that Terminator Dark Fate fixed it. Dark Fate basically picks up after T2. The movie opens in 1998 with Sarah Connor and teenage John at a bar in Mexico where the drinking age is much lower, and suddenly a T-800 walks up and kills him right in front of Sarah. This T-800 was another Terminator that Skynet also sent back without us knowing. This makes sense because why would Skynet only send one assassin back?
Yeah, cover your bases.
Yeah,
Send them all back.
just send them a bunch.
Yeah. Now that his mission is complete, that T-800 ends up retiring in Texas. He grows old, he learns to have a soul, he becomes a drapery salesman, a devoted husband, a stepfather. In his guilt, he continues to text Sarah Connor coordinates of the Terminators who will continue to appear every 2 years from the future so that she can kill them. He does so, he says,
For John! For John! For Chopper!
With John Connor dead and Cyberdyne destroyed, the post-apocalyptic future with Skynet has been erased. Instead, an AI called Legion has taken their place, and the leader of the human resistance is Danny Ramos, and a similar time-traveling assassin plot begins again!
Yes, now this time we're in the present day and the Protector is Grace, an augmented human super soldier from the year 2042. She has a tattoo of the coordinates to that T-800's home. And the whole group, including this T-800 and Sarah Connor and Grace, end up helping Danny by destroying their new Legion Terminator in a hydroelectric turbine, leaving only Sarah Connor and Danny Ramos alive to keep an eye on the young Grace as Judgment Day inevitably approaches. There's actually an awesome callback with Danny watching young Grace on a playground through a fence, just like Sarah Connor in that nuke nightmare in T2.
I remember that! This new updated timeline closes the loop just like the first two Terminators did. Danny becomes the badass resistance leader because she meets Sarah Connor and learns from her. This is just like how Sarah Connor became a badass because Kyle Reese came back to protect her. The act of time travel creates the history that led to the future time travel in the first place.
That's right, predestined loops. And there are two clever ways that Dark Fate cleans up the timeline while acknowledging other hypothetical timelines that might exist for movies we might not want to remember, both past and future. The idea that Skynet sent several Terminators to the past, each a sad, lonely robot walking the Earth to complete its task, like Mr. Meeseeks, suggests an infinite number of timelines that could play out infinite numbers of ways.
And with the T-800 stating that Judgment Day is inevitable in the 70% range of certainty, it sets the rules in this universe in a way that a future AI takeover can never be erased. Judgment Day is always upon us, and these stories are just about what we do as that inevitable, dark, depressing future closes in on us. A dark future we just can't escape.
You okay?
Oh, I'm back, I'm back.
How does Terminator Dark Fate rank among the other Terminator films for you? For me, it's T2, T1, and then Dark Fate, and the others are just in a dark pit that I never like to look in.
Follow us on social media and subscribe to New Rockstars for explanations of the constantly shifting timelines of every cinematic universe. Thanks for watching, bye!
Brr, 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 brr.